big leg, a butt, anything you want actually. So it's interesting. It's important that what's represented about the ability of the mind in the Vedas is something you're holding the torch.
Yeah, but in a sense,
already have a fake heart.
Yeah, we do.
but in a sense, I had to stop with this particular story where Indra is depicted as the highest faculty, but the Veda doesn't stop with that. Excuse me. Yeah. Second. Suspense. That's what it can happen. Excuse me.
So that is where you get your higher consciousness.
Yeah, the moments of silence. Okay. So the Vedic vision of the world itself starts explaining to you a lot more of where they were attempting, where it was all going. So the Vedas actually see the world, the sevenfold division of the world. Okay, before that I'll have to tell you what is the Vedic concept of creation in a sense. How did this whole creation come about? So one of the Upanishads tells you that, the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says that this superconscious existed, the all being, everything existed. And then suddenly for no reason it felt lonely. So it decided to create another. Now how would it create another? Anybody?
By dividing oneself.
No, it is. So dividing oneself
Desire.
is Huh?
Desire?
Desire, okay. Okay, so what he did basically is that he created an exact opposite of himself. Because the only way another could exist is when it didn't exist, in a sense. So he created this absolute negative. So if he was light, that was darkness. But the problem is that this absolute opposite didn't have any reality of existence. Because this is, that is not. And therefore that became weak or Shitilam about it. It started losing its importance. And it started losing its whatever it was. So then in order to give that certain validity, this plunged into that. Okay, so now the whole purpose of creation in a way is to rediscover itself through that. So what the Vedas do is that they divide existence into 7 levels of consciousness. So through this talk I have really touched the fringes of what the Vedas go into. But to give you an idea, I had spoken about that. Now, the Vedas divide the world into these 7 layers, which if you go from top down, is Sat, Chit, Ananda, or truth, consciousness, bliss. Then you have a middle world, which is called Vijnana or Mahas, or also you can term it as supramental, or Shrivano terms that realm supramental. Then you have mind, life, body. Okay, so when the absolute negation of that all-knowing, all-thing was matter which didn't know anything. But if you look at creation, from matter life came. So how was it possible for life to emerge out of matter if life was not involved in matter somewhere? So the whole purpose of man is from this ignorant hill of being. The hill of being represents his ignorance, the concretization of the ignorance of creation. And that has these different levels of being. So we can go into the legend of Vritra, where it says that because ultimately that superconscious has become all of this. So there is that delight, that truth, that sun which was everything, is there even in the darkest caves, is there even in this body, is there even in matter. And one has to rediscover that sun in the darkness. So the Vedas talks about going from one level to another, to another, to another. And they say that this lower level of life, mind, life and body is based on ignorance. Because the highest faculty in this is the mind, which is not an instrument of knowledge. It doesn't know, it will reason. And reason is only an approximate guess of the truth. The upper 4 worlds are the worlds of consciousness or knowledge. They are knowledge based. So you have Sat, Chit, Anand, the truth, consciousness, bliss. So the goal of the rishis was basically to climb the hill of being of this negative thing and reach that superconscious experience. And once they had reached that experience, they say that there is a particular experience that the rishi describes as acquiring. Okay, in this I'll go into it because it says in this story, legend of the Vedic rishi, in this Angirasa rishi legend, there is this concept of, there are 2 kinds of Angirasa rishis basically, or there is one kind of Angirasa which becomes the second kind of Angirasa rishi. So you have these Angirasa rishis who are known as Navagwas, or they perform the sacrifice over 9 months. Now again there are some very occult truths about what these 9 months are. I have yet to find out. Okay, so what this month signifies is a question, because then there is the dawn, after every sacrifice, after every night that one experiences. So now when I tell you the terms like night, it would mean the ignorance of the time when they are lost, those cows. So this night every time is followed by a dawn, or those rishis who find the cows again are greeted by Usha, or the dawn. And then because it's not a permanent realization, again there is the night which will follow. So similarly in this way there are 9 months of sacrifice that they perform continuously. Now these rishis are unable to, although they get the cows, they are unable to release that sun which is in the dark caves, because they don't have the power. So they say that there is a rishi called Ayasya. So when Ayasya joins these, he is the 10th rishi who joins this fold of 9. When he contributes to this, then they get the sun. And what is his contribution? He is the knower of the 7-headed thought. So now the knower of the 7-headed thought means that he knows the truth, the absolute truth of every level of consciousness. So when he has that knowledge, when you are equipped with that knowledge, only then you can go into the cave and release the sun. Until then, this game of losing the cows, winning the cows will be happening. So now, because the Vedic Rishi describes his experience, he says, when Ayasya joins this company of Navagwas, then the Vritras and all can harm him no more. Because then they know the truth of all principles, they have gone beyond that. And interestingly enough, they say that this 7-headed thought has to be established in the 7 waters. So the 7 waters represents the movement of the 7 levels of consciousness. So when that knowledge of these levels is inside the movement, the knowledge of the movement of these levels, then you get the release of the honey. So this honey that the Vedas talks about is the sweetness of existence, or the sweetness of creation, which flows behind. It's not that it doesn't exist, it flows behind. But it's only when the rishi, through this particular effort, through the sacrifice is very important, performs sacrifice and gets these cows, gets these waters flowing, that he can taste of that honey. So it's not that you have all of this in one part, necessarily. The rishis, as and when they experience the different things, describe them in their experiences throughout the Vedas. So they're scattered here and there. So in a sense, we are all rishis in our own respect, let's say, who have to create our own legends and discover once more those things that were there behind. Discover the honey, taste of the honey that existed.
I just need to reflect on something for a moment, because the way you just described this was so beautiful and elegant. And what I'm realizing is that most of us, throughout our days, are filled with all kinds of negative thoughts and worries, and the computer breaking down, and the mouse not working, and getting frustrated, or getting too much mail, or not enough mail, or the wrong letter, the wrong email. And one thing I'm realizing is, just listening to you speak, one of the things that's so beautiful about literature, ideas, mythology, in this case manifested by the truth of the Vedas, is that this gives us an imagery that, just hearing this, like you were speaking English, not Sanskrit, but just the way you were speaking and manifesting the honey and dripping, we have images that can actually bring a certain sense of peace. And it's something to anchor our yearnings and our beliefs. A story, an image of, even the 7 waters rippling. So that's one of the most beautiful things that you can offer from this tradition, is a way of seeing the world in a way that I'm currently not when I'm in front of my computer screen for 10 hours a day. And that in and of itself is very beneficial in loosening the grip or the concreteness of the rigidity of the mind.
Exactly.
And so that in and of itself is one, the use of visual metaphor like that, or even language, just listening to you speak, is a method.
Yeah. It was interesting because I was discussing with a person who's practicing clinical psychology in Canada. So, because I'm in this field and I'm not aware of psychotherapy as such, or the Western psychology. So I was just sharing ideas with her, and what she told me is that how they help people solve their problems. They say that we make them distance themselves from their problems. So you recognize that, okay, this element is there in me and it wants such and such thing. This element is also there in me and it wants such and such thing. Now, there is a conflict between